Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues, and any issue that's related to those issues, such as politics, philosophy, Bible, and theology. A shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Thank you all for your support, to my Patreons who continue to support me. And I want to welcome everybody to the second episode of the first season of the Rabyd Atheist Sunday Show. I first of all, I've got to take care of a small matter of business. I want to thank everybody for their comments this week on my last video. I think I'm heading the right direction based on what I've heard. So thank you very much. I also wanted to issue an apology to Tim Mills. I was supposed to interview with him this Sunday morning, but I had forgotten that I had an appointment to go relax with some friends, and there was just no way to do the interview and go with friends. And they had spent some, I had spent some money, and they'd spent some money for this little trip. So instead of doing that interview, I'll be heading to Renfest and kicking up my heels a little bit for to relax a little bit. And I do apologize to Tim Mills. I really do want to do that interview. He has a great channel. Go check it out. I'll leave a link up above my head. Go give him some love. I today want to just talk a little bit more about Noah's flood. This time I'm kind of actually dealing with the story, and I'm asking a very simple question as a theologian. What kind of God is the God of the story of Noah's Ark? And one of the things that I, as an open theist, recognize with the story of Noah's Ark is a foreknowledge problem. If God knew for sure that everybody was going to become wicked, how do you fix that? How do you get that going? Well, as an open theist, I said, well, God knew all the possibilities of the future, and the reason he has regrets is he regrets that this particular alternative future is what panned out. Now, it does bring up a couple of questions, though, about God's omniscience then. Yes, an open theist diminishes God's omniscience to a certain point. But when you talk about Genesis 6 through 8, what we're talking about is God here. What kind of nature does this God have? Well, if God can see all the possibilities of the future, it would stand to reason that in his knowledge, he would have contingency plans to avoid pretty much every possibility, that he could find a way to avoid the possibility of having to drown the entire world. Because even though this gets you out of a foreknowledge problem, it doesn't get you out of a moral problem with God, per se. What it does is it puts you in a position where God knows all these possibilities of the future, and then morally just sits back and does nothing when it comes to, the problems of the world. It seems like God, being a compassionate God, would try to have found a way to talk to these people in such a way that they would not have wanted to take the wicked path. They would have saw the benefits, and God would have been a very persuasive God if he existed as the way most people conceive him. The point is this: if God was truly omniscient and omnipotent and truly compassionate, Noah's flood should not happen. Even if God doesn't force any decisions, he should be a capable enough person to persuade people to certain ends. And this is kind of what undercuts his existence to me. And the Noah's Ark story is just a really good one to do that with. The fact that God regrets something gives him very human emotions, and that his solution is so horrible. I don't know. If I find that something I'm doing has completely gone to shit, I don't really think that the solution is to nuke all the people involved except the ones that were following my plan. I kind of think that maybe my plan might have sucked. And I think that's the real problem I have with this story is it is kind of the beginning in the Bible. The Bible begins to justify God's bad behavior simply because he's God. Okay, he's God, so therefore we don't question what God is doing. We just don't. And it's this continued justification of God's bad behavior that starts here and continues here. I mean, we've already talked about how the fall could have gone differently. God leaves basically a container of bleach open with a couple of 2-year-old moral and mental midgets running around, and then wonders why they drank it. It's like, Jesus, God, fucking dude, you set the situation up and you set them up to fail. The whole Cain and Abel thing, good grief, why don't you resurrect Abel, and say, hey, I'm not going to have killing. Okay, I'm just not going to have killing, you dumbass. But we don't have that in the Bible. And here, when we get to Noah's flood, it's the same shit. God acts incompetently, and we somehow justify his incompetence. And I used to do this as a minister all the time, is justify God's incompetence. And what you begin to realize is this is why the God of the Bible doesn't exist, because he's a complete fabrication of human beings. He's incompetent. He does things poorly. His planning is bad. But he has a massive amount of power, and when he gets pissed off, he kills people. Somebody did a study of, comparing Satan to God and their kill count. And God is way ahead. I mean, Satan's got like 10 to 12 people he's killed in the Bible. If you take Job's family into account, that's pretty much the only people in the whole Bible that it says that Satan killed them is Job's family, his kids, okay? But he did that with permission of God too, so I call that into question. Is he just a hitman? And God, right here in the gate, by the time we get to Noah's flood, and the flood starts, all living creatures that had the breath of life in them died. I don't know how many people that would have been. I've had people figure out what a population growth from, say, a couple hundred people to whatever this was 1,500 years later would have been, but it's in the millions, okay? And all these people drowned, okay, which is a really horrible fucking way to die if you really think about it, is you can't breathe, and the thing you breathe in is water, which hurts like a son of a bitch. Anybody who's ever inhaled water knows what that feels like. So, God doesn't just kill people, he just doesn't strike them dead and be merciful about it, he drowns them. There's nothing merciful about this God, and there's nothing good about him either. He's a mass murderer at this point. I remember having a discussion about the God of Noah's flood with a friend a couple years ago, and I flat out told him, I said, the God of this story is an evil fuck. He says, well, these people were wicked, they deserved it. I said, the babies, the infants, the pregnant women with unborn children, they deserved it too. Jesus openly says that in the days of Noah, things were just going on. People were marrying, getting married. They were doing business. They were being normal. He doesn't paint the picture of a wicked society, just that they were doing normal human things. And then the flood killed them and washed them all away. So that's not the issue here when we look at this story. It's like, if that's the case, then you had 2-year-olds running around that got drowned. You got infants that were drowned. You got pregnant women that drowned with the unborn child inside of them that had done nothing wrong. When you start to look at the real death toll and who's really getting killed here, people of faith don't want to think about that. They want to think of them all as adults doing evil shit, and that way they can justify their feelings that, these people, need to be killed. But when you start throwing in the infants and the unborn children and everything else, I think I'd done a video before where I said God is not pro-life, and I'm going to maintain that here. God is very pro-death. He kills a lot of people, and the flood is God mass murdering the world's population save 8 people. And only because, quote unquote, they found grace, unmerited favor. It's not that Noah and his family were perfect. They were just the best of the lot, okay, according to God. But everybody else gets killed, they get destroyed, and their whole society is destroyed too. And I don't know, if you want to justify this God's behavior, you have to justify how it's right for God to kill unborn children. If you're a conservative Christian, you're pro-life, you have to be against God in this story because he kills pregnant women. Okay, he kills unborn children. He kills infants. He kills toddlers, small children, kids that really haven't had a chance to make any really bad moral choices. They're dead. Okay, and that the destruction level is absolute. It doesn't say that there were exceptions, and a lot of theists try to wiggle off this story, but the morality of this story is really bankrupt. And that's, the morality of Noah's flood is that God can be justified to do anything simply because he has power. And basically, might makes right. And this is a theme throughout the Old Testament, by the way. Might makes right is just straight up a theme of it. If I consider the story of Job, what's God's answer to the charge that Noah says, why did you come after me without cause? And God's answer is, I'm God, get over it. Okay, and that's not really a justification. It's like when I was raising my kids, and people would say, well, why do we have to do, my kids would say, why do we have to do this? Well, I'm dad. I hated that excuse, that rationale so much. I avoided it my entire time parenting. I really did. I didn't want to stand on my authority. I wanted to stand on my good reasons for doing something rather than doing that. And the God of Genesis 6-8 is just kind of a dick that says, I'm in charge here. I think you're all evil, so I'm going to fucking kill you. And I think that's the real problem I have with that God. He shows himself to be not much different than all the other pagan deities that just get pissed off and kill people. He just does it on a massive scale. Of course, the conclusion of the story is that, Noah and his family survive, and they end up on some mountain, and they come down and they offer up sacrifices and shit. And we find out the reason why some of the accounts say that there were 7 animals instead of, because we got to sacrifice 5 of them, We just wiped out the entire animal population, and the important thing is to burn some of them on an altar. This is just nonsensical bullshit. And, once everything settles down, fine, whatever. It's interesting, the choice of birds, I think. Being a pagan guy, I like ravens. Ravens are actually pretty good birds, very loyal ones, more solitary than others, hang out with wolves, so they're always the bad guys, but harbingers of doom and things like that, which is really weird because when you consider the symbiotic relationship between wolves and ravens, they're actually quite cooperative. Doves, on the other hand, are kind of fucking useless, if you ask me. They just kind of hang around and eat shit, which is fine, but, whatever. But the dove comes out good, and the raven comes out as a bad guy. Doesn't really want to do his job. But I think there's a theological statement there, because a lot of pagan cultures value ravens over doves, and of course the Israelites have to write something different. But now we have this last part of the Noah's flood story where we have another genetic bottleneck, where we have 8 people that are going to repopulate the earth. I'm going to get to Noah's little drunken fit next week, but I think that's a very interesting story in and of itself. But at this point, we have 8 people. It doesn't say that Noah and his wife had any more kids, so we're really not including them in the discussion. So we have basically 3 couples that are going to repopulate the earth. There's not enough genetic material there to do that. We know that for a fact. If you're going to have a successful colony, and people say, well, how did evolution answer? Because you're dealing with populations, you're dealing with thousands of people slowly changing over time. Not just 2 that just suddenly develop and start a whole new thing. That's kind of nonsensical, but that's why the Bible goes the nonsensical route, because that's the way pagan, ancient, superstitious people think. And so you kind of discard that. But the whole sacrifice thing is there again. We saw this in Cain and Abel. the sacrifice thing, and now we see it again, the blood sacrifice, and another covenant with God with blood, because God makes a covenant with Adam. We assume he kills animals, but it doesn't really say. But here we know that some animals got killed to be offered as sacrifice. We have the origin of the rainbow. From a social standpoint today, the rainbow symbol is controversial. Christians say that's God's symbol of promise, and you got LGBTQ people say, no, we're going to adopt that. All the colors of the rainbow make the rainbow look beautiful, and I can buy that symbol. So it's this whole story, though, from a moral aspect of God is, Jesus H. Christ, God, don't you have a better solution than this? Don't you have something where people don't have to die in mass, where pregnant women and infants and little children aren't killed because you're pissed off at the world? You're mad that they didn't follow your plan. Well, maybe you should come up with a fucking better plan. I don't know. I don't know. The God of the Bible out the gate just seems kind of like an asshole. And, for years as a pastor, I had to justify this stuff. Now I just don't do it. I don't justify it anymore. I look at it and somebody asks me about it and says, yeah, God's kind of an asshole there. He just drowns a whole bunch of people because they don't live up to his expectations. But there's nothing in the story that says that he really clearly explained what his expectations were and showed the benefits of following his expectations. So we don't have any part of that in the story. Somebody wanted me to mention, there's another small part of the story where you have giants, and it's come up a couple of times in some of my discussions here and on Facebook about the giants. You need to understand that the ancient Israelite people had this thing about sex and angels, and that having sex with angels was a really, really bad thing. And yet, nobody ever holds the angels accountable. If you look at the book of Enoch, there's this whole, what makes these people really unrighteous is having sex with angels. And the giants is supposedly a product of that human women are having sex with angelic beings, and they're producing children that turn into giants. One of my patrons made the point, well, how do you pass this through the birth canal? And that part doesn't bother me so much, because we've had people with giantism today, and they're born normally, okay? And they look normal. The problem with people with giantism is their growth hormone doesn't shut off, and it keeps running well into their 40s and 50s. That's why they don't live as long. Andre the Giant's probably the most famous one. Wrestler, Princess Bride, things like that. But he got to a point where his knees were just gone. His body was continually growing. It never stopped. And, he started out as, just a big baby, and that's easily explainable. So that's not the problem I have with the story. It's the whole sex with angels thing that bothers me, because human beings are considered immoral for doing it, but nobody ever holds the angels accountable for doing it. You never really see in the whole sex with angels dichotomy, how come the angels aren't sinners? How come they're not defying God's will? And, I just don't get the story. It's kind of weird. It's one of those weird side notes, and it's just strange to me. So that's kind of the morality of Noah's flood. I just don't have a lot of good uses for it anymore. There's not even really any good morals to the story other than, don't fuck with God. He's kind of an asshole. So there's that. Deconversion issues, or atheist community issues. The atheist community has kind of been quiet this week from my standpoint. There really hasn't been a whole lot going on. And this is kind of symptomatic whenever in the United States, when the Democrats are in charge, the powers that be don't really see atheists as an enemy per se, and so they don't give us a hard time. So we don't really have to defend ourselves that much. And I think the thing about atheism and atheist activism is we do better when conservative Christians are in charge and we have to defend ourselves against them. And then people kind of pay attention to us more because they want to hear what we're saying. And more they've been hearing what I'm saying. My whole thing, of course, as always, is don't be afraid to call yourself an atheist. I think I'm trying to normalize the term. And I'm trying to, I named this channel the Rabyd Atheist for a reason. not just a play on my name, but the atheist part is me trying to normalize the term. An atheist is simply somebody who doesn't have any belief in any gods or goddesses or whatever. And I just don't. I follow a pagan philosophy of virtue, but I don't, and I do that mostly because virtue works. You know, I'm a pragmatist, and everybody should have a code, but because it leads to better survival. And I look at that sort of thing, and when I hear people, oh, you don't want to be an atheist. Well, I heard they don't believe in God, but they're an atheist too. And it's like, it's the same fucking thing. You know, I just don't, you do realize it's the same thing. You know, I've heard multiple accounts of people telling people that their family, they were an atheist. And, well, I can understand you not believing in God, but why do you have to be an atheist? And it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You don't even know what an atheist is. Okay, and it's the fact that the religious right has so demonized the term that even people that agree with you as an atheist don't like the fact that you use the term. And I'm trying to normalize the term and just say, hey, you know, spare me the propaganda. Okay, so we have that issue. So that was the only issue I really saw in the atheist community, was that it's kind of quiet, at least from my perspective. I didn't see a lot of politics. I mean, probably the big thing that happened in the last couple of weeks is, of course, Biden visited the Pope and, you know, crapped himself or whatever. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But the fact that, you know, at this point, you know, I get disappointed in the atheist community when Democrats and liberals visit religious figures and pay them homage, because at that point they become kind of hypocritical. Everybody went gaga every time Trump visited with an evangelical leader in the United States, and separation of church and state. Biden goes and visits the Catholic Pope, and you don't hear peep about separation of church and state, and why the hell is President Biden meeting with a powerful religious figure? You know, whatever. I mean, he's a head of a state, and I get that, but still, it's like, Jesus H. You know, it's hypocritical. So I'm going to call Biden out. Dude, I can appreciate that you don't let your religion interfere with politics, Biden, but Jesus Christ, this is a religious figure. This is somebody that makes their living predatoring on people's gullibility. You really shouldn't be paying homage to this guy. But as a Catholic, I bet you did. I bet you kissed his ring and did the whole bullshit. And if I'm going to call out Trump for meeting with some weirdo evangelical leaders, I'm calling out Biden for meeting with the head of the Catholic Church. So, you know, I'm not going to be hypocritical in that regard. I don't think a president of the United States should be meeting with the Pope. Sorry, I just don't. I just don't have a lot of truck with that. For the same reasons that you still maintain a pro-choice stance is the same reasons that you should also not go visit the Pope as a president of the United States, as a secular president of the United States. And so I do have a problem with that. I'm not going to be hypocritical and not say something. So there it is. I find Biden's devotion to an invisible imaginary character to be just as troubling as Trump's devotion to an imaginary character. So there's something about that mentality that creates problems for me. There's an issue there of dealing with reality. So there we go. Deconversion. The biggest thing that comes up in deconversion for me, last week I talked about guilt and how as we do new things that our denomination or religion never allowed us to do, we always have that tang of guilt associated with it. And I've told people, I said, you know, you got to getting over that is like every time you do something new that before you weren't allowed to do, you're going to have that guilt. Now, in my case, I've done a few things that, you know, I drank some beer, I did some other things, you know, that my denomination don't allow. I now, you know, engage in certain activities on the internet that before would have gotten me canned. If you need a picture for that, then I can't help you. So it's different ideas that your religion says is wrong or sinful, and then you go do them, and you have that momentary guilt where you're going, this is wrong, but then you realize intellectually, no, there's nothing really wrong with it. My biggest issue personally right now is the whole, I'm divorced now and I'm single again. And so now I'm approaching the whole world of dating and who I am and all that, from a sexual point of view and a sexual orientation point of view. And I'm having to rethink it ahead of time. And because, for instance, somebody asked me, would you have sex on the first date? And the answer is yes, if I felt an emotional connection with the person. In my Christian state, the answer would have been an automatic, oh, hell no. Because I wouldn't have wanted to lose face with my Christian friends, because that's fornication and that's a sin. You only have sex with the person you're married to. Now, the Bible makes some very notable exceptions to that, and I've pointed people out to those. Most notably that a guy can grab an Israelite woman and rape her, and then pay her father the bride price, and he's got a new wife. So there is sex with somebody you're not married with. The Bible seems to be pretty sketchy when it comes to the idea of sexual slavery too. So, not all sex outside of marriage is necessarily bad, and even in the Bible. And so, but my issue now is looking at it from a standpoint, because I think we look at physical intimacy as spiritual. Well, I don't view it that way anymore. I don't have the spiritual connection thing anymore. And for me, it's just emotional, social connections, mental, intellectual connections, and then, of course, physical. And the physical connection to me is just an act between two people. And if they're consenting adults, they take the proper precautions, and they've thought about it ahead of time, they talked about it ahead of time, I think that that's responsible. If it's consensual, it's not a problem. So looking at it intellectually, I was like, well, my only issue then is personally me. I wouldn't have sex with a stranger. I wouldn't, it's not one of those issues that is good for me, because there's an emotional part of me, an empathic part of me, that requires at least a friendship level or some sort of emotional friendship connection where I feel something positive for that person and I want to express it. That's a different rationale entirely. And of course, virtue comes in for me. I want to be honorable. I want to show good hospitality. Hospitality branches out in a lot of directions, trust me. Fidelity is an issue. In polyamorous relationships, there's a lot of talk about being ethical, non-monogamous. And what the ethical stands for is the cards are on the table. If a married person approaches another person they're not married to in a non-monogamous relationship status, their marriage is open. To me, the ethical thing is to tell your person that you're married, your spouse, that you're engaging in this activity and have the cards on the table. I think I wrote recently, I'm not interested in being somebody's secret hookup. Okay, so that's me. Okay, and people should respect my personal choices on that, and they shouldn't be alarmed by that. And if you're going to tell me I'm wrong about that, you can't pull out an old book and say, well, this thing says it's wrong to do that. I don't care what this says anymore. Okay, this is antiquated. It's over 2,000 years old. Its moral and ethical standards are bankrupt half the time. It justifies slavery. It justifies the subjugation of women to men. It's garbage. Okay, when it comes to morals and ethics on this subject. As far as marriage goes, I look at it as a legal thing anymore. There's nothing spiritual or emotional or about it. Well, it's very unromantic. If you want a romantic marriage ceremony, fine. I'll grant you that. But once again, that's personal, okay? And it's not always necessary. A lot of people get married for the legal benefits, but sometimes the legal benefits aren't worth it. So you have to kind of look at marriage and sex through a more rational vein of mind and respect people's personal choices. And this puts me in a very awkward situation because I've had several comments on my dating life already. And it's like, I really haven't had a date yet. And it's probably because I'm being very picky. I'm trying to be patient. At the same time, I really miss human touch. I live alone right now. I need to get out more. I really do. One of the things I'm hoping with this Renaissance Festival today is getting out and maybe meeting somebody. I just want to have a good time, but if I come home with a woman's phone number because we had a good conversation, that would be a nice added bonus. But it's just, I'm in the position right now where I'm trying to follow actually my daughter's advice, which is be patient, find the right person. And whoever I end up settling down with and nesting with or whatever is going to have to be somebody pretty special. They're going to have to, because I consider I value myself now a lot more. The thing about deconversion is once you get rid of the guilt and once you get rid of the you're a no good sinner part of it, you begin to realize that there's certain reasons to value yourself. And if another person doesn't respect the way you value yourself, they're not the person. Okay, I want to be able to respect that person's how they value themselves, and I expect to be respected in return for how I value myself. And I think that's one of the bigger, tougher things with deconversion is because as you come out of that self-loathing and come into some real, genuine self-love for yourself and find out that there's good reasons to love yourself, you begin to want to find a person that respects that and also agrees with it, that they have good reasons to love them and you have good reasons to love you. And I think Robert Heinlein's definition where somebody else's happiness is essential to your own happiness is a good definition of love. When both people have that where they want the other person happy because when they're happy, they themselves are happy, is a pretty good definition. That's a good human, taking into account the virtues of honor and love and courage and truth. These are good ways to move forward with a relationship. And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm trying to find my first steps. I wrote somebody else in one of the websites I participate in that, let me put it to you this way about religion represses. When you're in a religion, your sexual identity and your sexual nature is repressed. It's kind of like having a plant that it's still alive because of something internal. But it doesn't get the sunlight and the water and the fertilizer it needs to truly develop and understand yourself as a person sexually. And so it's kind of shriveled up and it's kind of small. And when you get deconverted, okay, what happens is suddenly the sunlight comes into the room and suddenly you're getting fertilizer. You may have had a connection to some water, some lifeblood there. But now, in the previous religious environment, you're not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to expand your understanding of your own sexuality and your own sexual desires because you're told that those are sinful. Well, now you get out of that and you're kind of a shriveled up plant that hasn't really had an opportunity to grow, and now you're giving all the things that you need to grow. You're not being kept away from them. And you begin to grow and come to better understandings of yourself. It's a really organic thing. Deconversion is like that. The opposite side of coming to your true self is the opposite of deconversion, because deconversion causes you to deny yourself and not be yourself. Okay, when you're in a religious state, and deconversion is the removal of all that stuff. And so for me, I have always known in some sense or form that I have been polyamorous, but now with the religious aspect, I'm allowed to grow in that and come to a better understanding. I'm allowed to fill in the blanks, so to speak, of that. And I don't know where that's going to take me. It's going to be very natural. It's going to be very organic. It's just people need to understand, that I'm capable of loving more than one woman at a time. And don't feel guilty about that. I don't feel jealous about them being with somebody else. And I don't, there's just, these are the things that I've discovered that I always knew about myself, but I was never allowed to talk about them because my religion doesn't allow you to talk about them. This is the aspect of deconversion that is very positive, but it kind of also speaks to how religion has repressed that. Religion really tries to take control of two things. One, and they're both really a moral question. One of them, they try to get your money, or they try to get you to deny the usefulness of money or possessions or whatever. And the other big one is morality, and the big core moral issue is sexuality. Every religion has some sort of sexual thoughts, okay, and monetary thoughts, possession thoughts, and those are the two things in any religion. You're forced to go down a certain path with all religions on those two items, okay. Very few don't address them. I mean, some religions, when it comes to sexual, do whatever the hell you want. And it's the openness and freedom of that sexual expression that's the hallmark of that religion. Others, it's the other way around. Very repressive, vows of celibacy, things like that. And all of that kind of represses your own ability to search for yourself what you are. And this is a deconversion aspect. This is something that people need to understand. So when I get all the comments about my dating life and everything else, you need to understand I'm taking this very, very slowly. I'm not rushing it. And I'm trying to be, as I work through this, talk about it on the Sunday show here, because I think I'm not the only one that goes through this stuff. I don't think, when you try to look at rational, reasonable reasons of why you feel certain ways, your religion tells you that you're a sinner. Well, you remove the whole bullshit of sin because it's made up. And then you go, okay, well, I'm not a sinner, but I still have these desires. Are those desires normal? Now, you got to be careful here. There are some things that are always going to be against the law. I think pedophilia is always going to be against the law because kids simply don't have the capacity. It's kind of like the same reason why I don't think kids should necessarily go to church. Okay, because it's an indoctrinative thing, and a pedophile indoctrinates his victims in the same way. And I think that's why kids are a special case, because we're trying to protect them from being manipulated, and that's a good thing. Okay, it's just most people yell about pedophilia but don't yell about religious indoctrination, and I think that's the shame of it. And that's kind of where you have to deal with it. So there's that. This is going to be probably an on-running discussion because I'm in a position now in my life where it's like, okay, I have the ability to search and explore some things. I've got tattoos in mind. I'm growing my beard. People, oh, it's getting longer. I said, yeah. Eventually, I want a braid going down. I don't know how thick that'll be. My beard is kind of wiry, so I'm always trying to soften it. But, it's kind of changing who I am and my appearance, letting me be who I want to be, letting myself appear as I want to be. Now, I have a job where I have to be conscious of certain things, and that's just jobs, okay? But at the same time, there's certain other things where I can express myself differently and be different. And I'm not trying to, be a weirdo, but I just want to be myself. Part of that is this apartment. I've been asked by one person asked me, well, what's your theme for decorating your apartment? I have two words, man cave, and everything that goes along with that. It's a man cave. It's my cave. I come here to be the Neanderthal that I am after a hard day's work. I come here to kick back, relax, and be around the things that I love and enjoy. And so it's a man cave and everything that goes along with that. So if any person who comes here, if you're offended by a masculine man decorating his apartment as a masculine man who likes girls, then I guess you're going to have a problem in my apartment. But it's not in any way, shape, or form designed to be disrespectful. It's more of this is me. This is, if you walked into my apartment, you would see a pretty good expression of who I am as a person in every room of the house and of this place. And there's a lot of things off camera that I'll never show for that reason. But it's it's learning to express myself in where I live. It's learning to express myself in how I treat others. It's learning to express myself, taking away the guilt and the shame and the garbage that goes associated with religion. Now I'm kind of like that plant that suddenly has sunlight and fertilizer and water and more natural sources of water, and I don't have to dig my roots 500 different directions to get the nourishment and sustenance I need secretly. I can actually get things openly, and I think that's a big change for me. Just want to thank everybody for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are great. You're awful. I'm going to call this the end of this episode of the Sunday School, the Sunday Show. Appreciate all of you stopping by for the Rabyd Atheist Sunday Show. I think this format's going to work for me, where I sit down once a week, just pretend it's a radio show and talk for 45 minutes to an hour. This one's a little bit shorter than last week, but I think I like the format of it. It allows me just to talk about stuff. And this way also, if you're the kind of person that's busy, you can always put my video on and not necessarily watch the video. You can still hear everything I'm saying. There's not usually a lot going on. The reason I do it in video form is there's nonverbal communication that takes place in every conversation, and you can go back and watch and say, oh, okay, this is what he was thinking. But thanks for everybody. Thanks for the comments. If you have some suggestions from topics that you want me to talk about, put them in the comments of this video, and for episode 3, I'll be glad to address some of those comments. I just want to give a shout out to the Rabyd Nation again. Please, keep supporting me. I'm back. It's going to be slow going, I think. Whenever you take a long hiatus, it's always detrimental to your channel. But once I start producing videos on a weekly, regular basis again, I think we'll see some growth. I'm getting very close to 500 subscribers. I really wanted to appear on Tim Mills' show because he has a lot of subscribers, and I think a lot of them might have come and checked me out and joined. So that's kind of why I want to do that. Yes, it's shameful self-promotion. Deal with it. If I could retire to being an atheist advocate and making a good living at it, I would do so. But I have my other job being a teacher, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing a lot of different things that I enjoy. Finally, I think I have the resources and the means to get back into hiking, been lifting again, I'm watching my diet again, feeling a lot better. I've lost a lot of weight, and I still have some to lose, but I think I can pull that off within the next year. I'm almost back to pre-COVID weight, which was the best weight I had been in literally decades. So I'm almost getting back to that. I've got about 15 more pounds to go. I appreciate all the love and support from all of you. Some of you came along and said, where the hell have you been? And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. The concern has been well appreciated. And thank you for none of you saying thoughts and prayers go with you. That would have been a very awkward conversation afterwards. So as atheists, I appreciate that. I mean, you could have said it with a smiley face, I guess, and I would have appreciated the joke. But thank you, one and all, for being great there. Once again, thank you for every like, share, and subscribe. Keep doing so. You can follow me on Facebook. You can also support the channel through my PayPal and Patreon links, which will be in the description. And hopefully someday I can convince you to be a Rabyd Atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabyd Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.